Andrew Matthews, welcome to the show. Welcome to Become Your Own Superhero.
Nice to be here, Laban.
Well, it's nice to be with you, Andrew, and my new friend, Andrew Matthews, living up in the beautiful Cairns tropical part of the northern part of Queensland, coming in live, probably wearing shorts, I'm guessing.
I am.
Whereas it's just cold on the mother-in-law's kiss down here in Melbourne, but we won't let the weather stand in the way of what will be a wonderful conversation today. Andrew, thank you for coming on today. This is very exciting for me. I didn't know about you all that long ago, but I'm very grateful to have had you come into my life. And I know at least 8 million other people that have bought and read your books would agree with me. My first question, why is Nick Faldo so important to you?
Well, Nick Faldo is a golfer for those of you who don't play golf, and I don't play golf. But my first book, Being Happy, came out in 1988. And a couple of years after that, and this was in the time when fax machines, everyone had a fax machine, and you had this roll of thermal paper that went into a fax machine. I got up one morning and there was thermal printed fax right across my office, like 20 or 30 feet of it. And I started reading all these articles, many from the UK. Nick Faldo had just won the British Open golf tournament in a nail-biting finish. And apparently when they asked him in the press conference, because Nick had a reputation for being a little bit grumpy, I think. And they asked him, Nick, what made the difference for you in just being so relaxed and calm and winning the British Open golf tournament? And he said, I read this book called Being Happy. And that was, I suppose, what Being Happy needed in that part of the world to take it into the bookstores, and that was one of the things that really helped to take us global.
What a wonderful, wonderful feedback to receive, and then just to explode, because you are now in 47 different languages in more than 70 countries now, and I'm sure those numbers have gone up since they were posted on your website.
Yeah, and I have to thank my wife is my publisher, and she was the person who said soon after Nick helped us to start to get into a lot of different countries. We're going to take this global, and so we've had a focus because Australia is a small country, and if you've got a book or a series of books that you want to get into the hands of a lot of people, then you really need to start looking at other languages. And so we're in Mexico, and we're in Croatia, and we're in South Korea. We're actually in Iran, we're pirated. But I think, there's millions of our books in Iran, in every bookstore. Iran is not part of the world copyright agreement, so we don't get anything for that, but we console ourselves that we're making some people happy.
Well, who knows? You might have prevented a massive uprising with the wonderful content, and what a gift to the world that will be. And I'm sure you'll be rewarded in heaven, whatever that looks like. And that Nick Faldo story is a wonderful story. But there's one that I'd love for you to explore a little bit on. What happened to the guy who wore his wife's blouse to university?
I was in a shopping center in Kuala Lumpur in about 2013, and a fellow walked up to me. He was casually dressed but very neat, and he said, "Are you Andrew Matthews?" And I looked at his phone. I could see he was on my website. And I could see the picture on my website. I was wearing the same shirt that was in the picture. So I thought he was going to say, have you only got one shirt? But he said, my name is Teku, and I'm from Aceh in Indonesia. And he said, and he started to seem a bit emotional. So there was a Starbucks coffee place one floor up. So I said, let's go have a coffee upstairs. And so he said to me, when I was 20 years old, at my lowest point, he said, I was at university. I could only afford to eat one meal like every other day. And he said, so I had no money. And he said, a friend of mine gave me a copy of your book, Being Happy, the Indonesian version. And he said, I read it, and for the first time, I came to understand that I choose my thoughts. And it was the first time that I'd ever had anyone say to me, you should set yourself some long-term goals. So I wrote my goals on a card, and he said, I wanted to have a degree. I wanted to have a wife. I wanted to have 2 children. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to have a nice car. He said, and all that just seemed so ridiculous and impossible, but that was my card, and I pinned it on my wall and I looked at it every day. And he said, today I'm the Asian business development manager for Schlumberger. He said, I travel the world business class. He said, my kids go to an international school. I drive a BMW. And he said, my bonus last year was, and I don't even, in confidence, I can't share with you what he said his bonus was. And he said, your book changed my life. And tears were running down his face and tears are running down my face. I said, Teku, I didn't change your life. My book didn't change your life. You changed your life. And we've become fast friends, and we stay in touch, and we talk, and we go out to dinner or breakfast whenever we can, and when we're in the same country. And he's had several promotions, and then he's was headhunted by another multinational. And he is one of the most inspiring people that I get to spend time with. I get inspired by readers, you know.
I loved hearing that story in an interview that you had in Singapore or somewhere recently, and I was curious to know, not trying to focus on the monetary side of things, but the impact of having this man in your life and that wonderful feedback. Now that he's sort of ascended the ranks, have you benefited directly or indirectly financially in any way from that relationship?
No, I just, it just gives me, I've got a picture of him I have a board in my office, and I've got a picture of, I've got a goals board and a gratitude board. And I've got pictures of people that I love and cherish and who uplift me. And so I've got a picture of him and I at the One World Hotel in Kuala Lumpur, the day that we had our first breakfast. And let me tell you another story, because this is why I'm so passionate about personal development. His daughter, who was 13 at the time, that we had dinner, he told me this story a year or two later, entered an international competition for public speaking for 18 and under, 3,500 entrants. English is her second language. Age 13, she won it.
Wow.
Living with a man like that as her father, who's inspiring her and encouraging her and saying, go do it, do your best, set some goals. So all of these beliefs, ideas, attitudes are then passed down, and the next generation and the next generation. Amazing.
Wonderful. And the only reason I asked that question is the go-giver mentality. Bob Berg and John David Mann, who are American co-authors who put together this Go-Giver series. It's about creating wonderful abundance in your life, not just financial, but all, fulfillment, all the other stuff that, that you're talking about outside of the money by giving. And it's flipping the whole charity thing on its head. something that's become very important to me. And the value that you've got out of that relationship, all money aside, sounds like it's weight in gold, priceless really in many ways. And you must have received a lot of this kind of feedback over the 20, 30 years you've been doing this.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and it is really the cream and the. I mean, when you write a book, you never know whether actually anyone's going to like it, or actually, firstly, whether anyone's going to publish it. So when you get an email or a letter, and I'm fortunate that I get letters and emails really on a daily basis from somewhere in the world. A fellow from Mexico actually contacted me with an interpreter and arranged a Zoom call because he wanted to say that he was inspired by one of my books, and he rode a bicycle around the world. He decided, goals are important, and he wanted to spread happiness. And I think he went through 6 bicycle seats and 22 sets of tires, and he was arrested in China, and he met Michael Jordan and Bill Clinton and the Pope. And this very, I think, he not a fellow who's that worldly, not that educated, just decided, I'm going to ride a bicycle around the world. So you get stories like that, and then stories from people who just say, I was really struggling in my relationship with my husband, and your book encouraged me to focus on some important things, and life is better.
You make being a ultra successful best-selling author speaker look really easy, but I don't know that that's the case. What issues did you have getting this book published, the first one?
Well, I'd heard that it could be difficult to get a book published, so I had this master plan brainwave that was absolute genius. So and this is back before emails and the internet. So 1987, I wrote Being Happy, and I thought, well, if it's hard to get published, I'm not just going to send this manuscript to one publisher. I should send it to like however many I can find. So I got this book, and it was called The Writers and Illustrators Yearbook or something, and it listed basically every publisher in the world. So I found 60 publishers that I thought would be, publishers of adult nonfiction in the English language. So, and I sent off these 60 manuscripts, and I thought, this is genius, because if I send 60, there's going to be at least like 4 or 5 that like it, and then I'll choose. I'm in control, right? So I send off 60 manuscripts. How many rejections do you think I got?
I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say all 60 rejected you.
61. One publisher wrote to me twice and said, forget it. But I persevered. And here's another interesting story, because I was traveling through, I was doing workshops and seminars at the time, and I was traveling through Singapore on my way to Sweden. I'd been engaged to do a weekend workshop there. And I had lunch with a friend called Jackie, who I'd met in a seminar in Sydney. And I said, I've got this manuscript with me. I'm going to be coming back through Singapore in a week. So if you like, I can leave this manuscript with you. You have a read of it, see if you like it or whatever. Give you something to read. And so coming back from Sweden the week later, we met again, and she said, there's a publisher in my building She lived in Cairn Hill Circle in Singapore, and she was on like the 5th floor. He was on the 11th or something. And she said, I let him have a look at it. And his wife is in magazines, and they know what sells, and they want to publish your book. So that was the beginning. And my thought is this, that in life, in fact, many things don't work. Many things don't work. But if you do enough, then very often the opportunity that you're looking for will come, but not from where you've been pushing. It like sneaks up behind you. And so often, I mean, it can be that you're single and you're looking for your soulmate, and you start going to discos and you're going to the cricket or wherever it is that you think you're going to meet your soulmate. And all these people that you've got your eye on, and all the people or friends or sisters of people who you think maybe somewhere there, no. But from somewhere that you're not anticipating comes this person, this opportunity. But here's the thing, if you weren't putting in the energy and the effort, then that opportunity from where you never expected it to come from never comes. So you've got to be out there.
I could not agree with that more. The way I perceive the universe now, Andrew, is these waves of vibrations and energy, and what is happening in my life as we speak is more than enough evidence I'll ever need to know that what I'm doing is working based on that exact same principle, and it's very exciting. The books that you've written, I'll just reel off a couple now. How Life Works, Being Happy, as you mentioned, Follow Your Heart, Happiness in Hard Times. What do happy people have in common?
Gratitude. If there's one thing that happy people have in common, it's that they focus on what they have. We all know, and we've traveled to maybe places like Bali or Africa, and we see people who have very little, but they just seem to be so happy. And it's not about what you've got, it's about what you focus on. And so my thought is that happy people focus on what they have, and unhappy people focus on what's missing. That being so, I have a global membership group, and one of the first things that I get my members to do is to start making a gratitude list. Every day, just look for 3 things that you're grateful for. And the reason is that we find in life what we look for. And if you look for faults in your boyfriend, or if you look for faults in where you live, or what you don't like about your job, you find them. And if you look for good things in your neighbors, and if you look for good things in the opportunities you have, and if you look for good things in your parents, then you find them. And it's not really a terribly serious, life-shattering commitment. It is just, you say, every day I want to wake up and look for 3 more good things. And it's even better to find little things than big things, because you might say, well, I'm happy for my wife, and then tomorrow you say, I'm happy I've got a house to live in, and I'm happy I had a good education, and then you say, where do I go from there? But the fact is that happy people get excited about little things like, this flower just bloomed on my veranda, or I had this beautiful bird that came and sat on my chair, or this banana bread that I'm eating for morning tea is the most beautiful banana bread I've ever had. It's the little stuff. And the more that we can focus on just the little incidental things, then the more that we are starting to think like happy people think, because happy people focus on little things. Tiny things make them joyous. And having a gratitude list and looking for little things takes us closer and closer to being and thinking how happy people think.
I really love that, Andrew, and it's so simple, yet so overlooked. And I want to share a story to our audience that you and I know, because that's how you and I connected, but it exemplifies this gratitude, I think. And the story is this. I've got a book coming out. It'll be out by the time this podcast is released, called Bet on You. Get it at Kindle, and I'm going to record the Audible for it if you love these dulcet tones. And I was trying to find out another person to endorse the book. You know, if you want to get your book endorsed, I'm sure you'd agree, Andrew, you got to ask for people to endorse it in many cases, especially when you're new. And I thought Justin Langer, the current Australian cricket coach, would make a great person to endorse the book. He came on the podcast. We had a great connection. And in watching the footage of the podcast to really, before I asked him for his help, I wanted to add some value in his life. And a conversation that we had on the podcast, he was a huge fan of the artist Pink. And his bucket list is to have Pink come around to their family home in Perth to have a barbecue with Justin's wife and his 4 daughters. And that would just make his whole day. And I thought, how can I make this happen? I interviewed a guy, Steve Sims, who's called he's like the modern day Wizard of Oz. He's got a book called Bluefishing, and he's an executive concierge, and he's just the guy that can make this kind of thing happen. So I bought a copy of the book and wrote Justin this email and thought nothing more of it. But that's not the story. And I continued watching the podcast, and I asked him a question: who was the most influential person he'd ever met in his life? And he spoke about the story about when he was 18 years of age, 4 years before he was picked for the national cricket side. He met you and had a book signed and caricatured, because you're an amazing cartoonist, him with his cricket gear, holding his bat, and the number 250 above his caricature. Now, have a guess, audience. What do you think Justin Langer's top cricket score is? 250. And I was like, I wonder if Andrew knows this story. And so I reached out to you via LinkedIn, and we had this conversation. And what was it like hearing about the impact that you had on Justin Langer's life, Andrew?
Well, I was just delighted because Justin and I used to play tennis. I was living about 6 doors away from the cricket academy in Adelaide, and I had on the beach there, and I had a tennis court. So we used to try to improve our topspin backhands, and we played maybe, I don't know, about a half a dozen games of tennis at most. And I remember we had a conversation about the importance of the subconscious and about visualization and goal setting, so we were just chatting, and I can remember saying, Justin, you've got to start to use affirmations that affirm that you're comfortable in the Australian cricket team, that this is where you belong, and I'm loving being a part of the Australian Test team, and I'm scoring runs, and this is my dream come true, and I'm so happy being an Australian Test cricketer. So I can remember that, and I can remember in our kitchen signing a book for Justin, but I didn't remember writing 250. So 30 years later, you come along and say, he's had this 250 on the front page of his book. And obviously, as you and I understand, if something is that deeply imprinted in your subconscious, then you are such a long way to making that happen. And so, yeah, another demonstration that what we think about, what we picture, what we visualize comes to pass.
So this has made me think of something that maybe you haven't thought of yet, Andrew. And the next time you're at a book signing, which hopefully will be soon, you're going to be more conscious of the language that you use on the when you're signing these caricatures, because of the obvious impact.
Yeah, I mean, a lesson for me and a reminder for all of us. Just the words that we use are so very important. What we talk about. One of the things I often say is that what we think about, we talk about. That's pretty obvious. You think about food, you talk about food. But the reverse is also true. If you talk about food, you think about it. If you complain about things, then you think about. So hang on, I see that. Are we okay again? I bumped my microphone and
No,
it just said
still got you.
Still got me. So if we think about things when we talk about them, but the reverse is also true. What we talk about, we tend to think about. And so it's very important that we don't get drawn into this habit of complaining about things, whether it's about the weather or the government or I've never got any money, because it goes into our subconscious and it becomes a part of our reality.
Such a beautiful explanation, and again, really simple. It's something that I've experienced firsthand in my own life, and it's just helped me take everything supernova. I know people are thinking when they look at you or they listen to you, Andrew, they're like, what is this gift that this man has been given? You're a brilliant author, and the work that you put together, like what gift from God did you get that puts you above and beyond everyone else? But I don't know that that's the case either. What is the background? How did you get into all of this?
I'm a slow learner. That's my gift. I think a lot of people were aware of things like personal development long before I was. I never read a personal development book till I was 23. I never really thought about self-image or goal setting much or anything. And so when I started to discover some of these things at 23 years old, it was like, this is amazing. I've just read a book about the subconscious, and I go and tell someone, they say, oh yeah, we know about that. So I think because I was so slow, retarded maybe, in discovering some of those things, that I became so excited. Like, if I could go 23 years without understanding some of these basic principles about that happiness is essentially a decision we make, when it comes down to it, that blaming other people doesn't help, that you don't forgive other people because you agree with what they did. You forgive other people because you want your life to work. That basically worry doesn't help, that we find in life what we look for. All of those things, that writing down goals is the critical thing. You don't just think about them, you write them down. All of these things that I came across, I thought maybe there's a lot of other people out there that have never come across these concepts, or it's never been explained to them quite as well as it might be. Now, the thing was that once I got excited about these things, I started to read a lot of books, and I can remember reading about 200 books on attitude and goal setting and the subconscious. I couldn't believe how boring they were. And none of them had cartoons. I mean, this is 30 something years ago. So I thought, I'm going to write a book that's simple. I'm going to write a book that any 12-year-old can understand, because I get irritated with big words and people who don't get to the point. And I'm going to put cartoons in it. I knew I could put cartoons in it. I just didn't know that I could write the book. So that was my mission, to write a book for anybody and everybody. And what I began to find was that people would write to me and say, yours is not only the first self-help book that I've ever read, yours is the first book that I've ever read.
Wow.
So, and sometimes they would say, yours is the first book that I've ever read, and my life is so much better because of it. So for me, I continue, when I write, when I speak, I think I want a 12-year-old to be able to understand everything that I'm trying to get across. So for me, it's simplicity is critical. And often we don't even need to get new information. We just need to be reminded about stuff that we already know.
It's such great advice for aspiring writers or existing writers that want to be more effective in their reach for how much impact they want their books to have. The way that I've written mine, I deliberately tried not to use too much sort of verbose vernacular.
That's a big word.
Which is a big word in itself.
Spell vernacular.
I was going to say VEIN, vein. Sounds like something out of a Bram Stoker. And but it's made me really think about the next thing that I put together, the next book I write is, can I get this message out in a more simplistic way? Because we take a lot for granted being in the Western world, and you talk about people reading your book as the first ever book that they've read. Like, how powerful is that? I never even thought about it from that angle. So it's a really interesting perspective. And for people that don't think they've got a book in them, what advice would you give to people to encourage them to put their story out there?
I think you've got to do it if I think you've got to do it if you want to do it. So my thought is, if you have an inclination to write a book, to write your book, then it's really important to do it, because you don't write a book to make money. Most books don't make money. But it helps you to clarify what's important for you, and you get a chance to, if it's nonfiction, then you're, what are your values? What do you care about? What do you want other people to know and understand? And when you create that book, then you clarify your own understanding. If it's fiction, then that's something else again. But it's a creative endeavor that can be a joyful thing, and it's important to do things you love, firstly. So that's my thought, that it's important to do it, and regardless of whether anybody else reads it or likes it.
And what are some of the unintended good side effects of the writing that you've done, that you've discovered?
Well, for me personally, it's meant that I've spent the last 35 years traveling the world. So it's because of the visibility of my books that I speak in regularly when it's not COVID. I speak regularly in about 30 different countries. So for me, it's taken me around the world, which has been a joy. For me, travel, just for the sake of travel, is not exciting. But for travel, when I connect with real people, with people who live in that country, who are living and working, and then we do something together, that is what really excites me, to then create those lifelong connections, because we've worked together to do a seminar or an event or something like that. And then there are just things that spin off from being an author. Like, inevitably you have things like an Instagram page and a Facebook page, and then you make connections like that. But my books are really about, for me, making sense of life, and how can we live better? How can we have better relationships? How can we be more successful? So, when I go through difficult times or frustrations, and everything goes wrong, as sometimes it does for any one of us, then I have a chance to make sense of that, and very often it will end up as a book, for example, or in a book. The story will. So the heartbreaking stories and the frustrations become material.
Well, let's explore this for a second, Andrew. What was the last major adversity that you went through, and how did you cope with that?
Well, I wouldn't talk about the last major. Well, the major adversity, I think, for me, And for Julie and myself, Julie is my wife of 30 years, and her son Michael had a car accident when he was 18, massive head injuries. And Michael was, in fact, the doctors wanted to donate his organs on the first day. And Julie was very strong, and she said, my job is to save my son. And the doctors kept insisting and saying, he'll help a lot of people. And she said, give him 3 days. Just keep him alive for 3 days, and then you'll never see me again. And he was already on a respirator. So we all gathered at the hospital 3 days later at midday, and the doctors unplugged the respirator, and Michael breathed, and Michael survived. And it became a very long journey. Michael was half his hearing was gone, half his sight was gone. He couldn't speak, he couldn't walk. And so began basically 25 years of rehabilitation. And today Michael lives by himself, a couple of minutes away from where we live. He's still severely disabled, but we learn a lot from Michael. I learn a lot from Julie. And the three things that come up for me, and I will sometimes tell this story about Michael, is number one is perseverance. That sometimes perseverance just doesn't mean keeping on for the next week, but we're talking about year after year. And gratitude. We still have him. We hoped that Michael would have a different life than he has, but we're grateful we still have him. So perseverance, gratitude, and the other one is acceptance. That the first step to dealing with any major adversity is saying, this is where I am. We can say, well, it shouldn't be happening, or if someone had done something different, but it didn't. And happy people accept where they are and then move on to what they want. So that was an enormously life-changing and educational experience for Julie and I. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, Andrew. I had no idea. And my follow-up question is this: had you not been in the space that you are and the work that you do, how differently do you think you would have handled that situation?
Yeah, I would certainly have struggled more. I mean, I'm blessed to have a wife who has incredible strength and courage, and so I have been in many ways following her lead over these last 30 years or so. So, but for my own self, there's a point where you say, I write these books about happiness. I'd better practice what I preach. And, that's a good thing about writing books about attitude. At some stage, something comes along, you get upset briefly, but it's not that you don't ever feel disappointed. But the question is, how quickly do you bounce back? And that's what I tell myself. That I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be joyful 24 hours a day. But am I bouncing back when I get kicked in the guts?
Well, I was going to say, has there been any instances where you've cracked the shits in life and had someone very promptly remind you from the public and hand you a copy of your own book telling you to be happy or something along those lines?
I certainly, Julie, my wife, has sometimes said, if I'm expressing some disappointment or irritation, I can remember her once or twice saying, "Didn't you write that book called Being Happy?" "Yes, darling."
Well, I can empathise a little bit. I had a bit of a weak moment the other day and ate ice cream and custard, which is a vice of mine that I've been getting better and better at. And then my darling fiance, who's overseas at the moment, I told her about it because I'm honest with her about everything, and she was like, "Is that the behaviour of the man who's supposed to be the number one courage coach on the planet? Someone who's supposed to be leading by example?" And I got really shirty, which I was agitated from the excess carbohydrate, and then once I cooled down a little bit, I was like, actually, it's right. Like I'm teaching or speaking about, this lifestyle, and like you say, like I'm far from perfect, but it's the bounce back ability, and now I feel like I've come back stronger for it, and I think that's the blessing and owning what we're practicing, what we're preaching here.
Yeah, bouncing back, what it's all about.
Andrew, where do people find you?
AndrewMatthews.com is my website. That's Andrew. I think there's only one way to spell Andrew. Matthews, MATTHEWS.com. So I've got a free 7 Days to Happiness course, email course, that I invite you, those of you that are listening, to register for that, and I can send you some little messages about things that you can do every day for 7 days to be a little happier. I'm on Instagram, Andrew Matthews Author. I'm on Facebook, Andrew Matthews Author. And I'm probably some other places like LinkedIn. And I have a YouTube channel.
You do.
So on the YouTube channel, you'll see me drawing cartoons and things. My books are on Amazon and in bookstores around the world.
At all good major and minor bookstores. We haven't really focused much on the caricatures and the cartoonery because of the medium that we're using, and I don't want to exclude our audio only audience. But and I'll put that link below for the free 7-day course, 7 Days to Happiness, which I have taken and have benefited from dramatically. I've also powered through a number of your YouTube videos, which are very short and very easily consumable, and have lots of your wonderful cartoons on there as well, which is fantastic. Andrew, do you have any concluding thoughts for our audience today?
My thought is that if we can just be happy for the next 24 hours, if we can look for good things for the next 24 hours, and we do that, and then we get to tomorrow and we just say, this is my 24 hours. I want to look for good things. What am I grateful for? What do I love about the people that I spend my life with? If we say, I want to quit complaining, I want to be kind, if we can just say, I give one compliment a day to somebody, then, with those little things that just add up, make a difference. So I quit complaining. I be as kind as I can, because kind people are happy people. And every day I just say, what am I grateful for? Then at the end of it, we say, I had a happy life.
Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Matthews.